Well, thank you guys for being here today. And thank you to our panelists for taking some time out of your schedules to share some thoughts, your observations, and insights into the past, present, and future state of the office. I'm going to open up my first question to the entire panel, as you guys each come to the table today with different areas of expertise and different backgrounds, both in terms of education and your professional careers. So first question, I'm going to start with you, Angela, since you're clearly front row and the only one with a notebook prepared, apparently.
Don't call me out.
I'd totally be the same. In your experience, what are the biggest problems or opportunities your internal stakeholders or clients are currently asking you to help them with?
So being on the architecture and design side, obviously there's not one client that we're dealing with, and all of the challenges are somewhat different but somewhat the same. The question we get a lot is, what are people doing? And especially I'd say a year or so ago, they wanted to know if there was some magic solution. I'm sure Zach will get to this on what's the approximate square footage we should be ending up in. My personal approach is individualized, so I like to work with my clients to determine what the actual needs are in the office space and build their plan, their future goals around that, instead of, a space that will end up in a magazine or, some trend that we're trying to push. So it's an individualized approach.
That's great. Lee, how about you?
I think right now it's hard because there's so much between what we think we want, the theoretical approach to office and how we're using it, and then what our executives want, and then what we actually do. So kind of finding that balance is really what we're all trying to do right now. And part of that is really understanding what it is, because I think everybody wants flexibility, but our teams also want collaboration. And I think that, finding the right balance between all of that. And I think that it becomes very difficult unless you do work with all the individuals within the group to understand what each one wants, right? And then finding a way to bring that together. So I think that right now, the most difficult thing is figuring out exactly how we want to go back to work, and just trying to find the balance between what everybody wants in the different levels of the organization.
Great.
Oh, and I can't wait to hear the magic solution.
No magic. So I think what we're hearing mostly is there's a disconnect typically between management teams and employees. And so what the executives are trying to figure out is, how do we pull employees back to the office as opposed to pushing them back to the office? And you're seeing it play out in the tech sector right now, right? Every day there's a press release on, we're having layoffs, and then we're having people come back 3 days or 4 days or 5 days. And I think what small to medium-sized companies are really trying to figure out is, what do our employees want, and how do we get them to come back in? Because the leadership teams tend to believe that when everybody's together, they can solve bigger problems, they can innovate better, and they can actually drive the entire enterprise forward in a more meaningful way. So that's what I'm seeing.
Sounded magical to me. Sounded magical to me.
I've got the magic answer. I'm kidding. So in terms of through a furniture lens and completing a space lens with additives after the furniture comes in, I think the biggest thing we're seeing is the nervousness from those management and upper level groups of investing in this furniture with the worry of, are people going to even come in to use it? We want to provide these solutions that are really robust and really support the type of work they want to do. But oftentimes we're battling someone even sitting on their sofa with a laptop on a pillow. I do this at home. And it's not even a really robust solution. So it's also looking at the lens of what else is happening in that space that isn't necessarily furniture or a solution related problem. So looking at, in terms of fringe, what are we adding to really emulate that experience that these employees are having in their homes, in the workplace, and then the balance of taking a residential idea into a commercial setting. So I think that's a lot of the struggle we're seeing today through specifically the furniture lens.
That's great.
So it's hard to go last because they've said a lot of things I would love to say as well. But from an applied research and consulting standpoint, and a lot of the research that Steelcase is doing on how work has changed is really talking with our customers across North America around how work has changed in business process as well as the culture of organizations. And so Angela started with saying it's kind of independent of that specific company you're working with, what they're trying to achieve. But we really dial into how work happens. So work modes, how you're spending your time, and ultimately how you want your organization to behave. And so when you think about that as a business driver standpoint, then you can best determine what enablers you need. Space and tools are key enablers. Experiences are key enablers that you can create for your organization. And so when you think about that, one of the best examples is the hybrid collaboration. And we hear a lot of tension around employees coming back into the office and spending their time on their individual laptop on a Zoom or Teams call. And how do you best support when I'm in the office, but some of my teammates are not there, that experience? And so we're seeing leaders determine that we want people in, but when you're in, how do you solve for the way that work happens today? So partnerships like Microsoft and Logitech and some of the work we're doing there really start to solve for these critical ways we're working today that we didn't necessarily have 3 years ago. And so I can't ask employees to come in or expect them to be inspired and not required to be in just by having them show up to what they had before. So solving for how work happens now and how different it is, different tools we use, different work processes is key. And those enablers are where you really need to focus your efforts.
That's great. Rachel, thank you. Yeah, so no magic bullet, but it seems like it's a very personalized thing. Every organization seems very unique to solve for. Rachel, I'll let you go first this time and direct this one to you. Why are we seeing an increase in companies asking employees to come back into the office 2 to 3 days a week?
Yeah, a lot of companies are starting to put a stake in the ground and say, we expect you in 2 or 3 days a week. And our research indicated that last year when we were going deep with HR executives to say, what do you see your strategy being for your employees? And most identified it was either 2 days in and 3 days home or 3 days in and 2 days home. So one mix of that, it's 40 or 50% of your time, we expect you to be in the office. And as more organizations are being more vocal about that, then it gives confidence to other organizations that we can ask our employees to be here more frequently and set some parameters around what days or what number of days we want you here. I would say that those leading organizations who have put that out there are giving that confidence, but also companies are gaining confidence in that they need to do this for their culture, the communities in which they want to create within their organization, and for their talent to develop, to collaborate, to network, to really break down silos that have been created. And so the meaning of why be in the office is clearer now than ever. And last, I think the uncertainty over the last 3 years, there were a lot of start and stops of, okay, after Labor Day, we're going to be in. Okay, in the new year, we're going to be in. Okay, after spring break, we'll be in. And we finally feel comfortable that we can put that date or these expectations out there, and people will start to understand that it's time, and it's time to be together and time to recultivate that culture that we've had.
That's great.
If I
Yeah, please
chime in a
add.
little bit.
Absolutely.
The why is really interesting, right? And when you start thinking about it, you start thinking about, is it about, because what we hear a lot about productivity, right? And people are saying, we're productive at home. Why does the company need us to come back in when we're getting our 8 hours of work done? It may be at, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., but we're getting it done. The why for the businesses is a cultural thing, right? It's really because when people are working from home, a lot of executives feel that the job is being commoditized and that they're not really part of a team. They're not really collaborating the same way people collaborate in person. And so they're saying, we need to get people back in the office so they can participate, so that they're not just delivering the product that we're asking them to, but so they're actually using the creative mindset that we hired them for. And it brings to mind the difference between a team and a championship team, right? Championship teams practice together, they play together in every business, in every sport, in every different phase of reality. So that in-person collaboration and in-person teamwork really drives businesses to the next level. So
That was really well said, Zach. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Going back to your question though about the 2-3 model, hate to be the one squeaky wheel, but reports actually show that even with Apple being an example that mandated that, people are not happy with the 3-2 model. That 76% reported that didn't provide the flexibility that it sounded like it did. And so for a lot of people, it feels like a false sense of flexibility where we were given as employees the freedom or trust during COVID to say, hey, we don't really have a choice, but we're going to trust that you're doing the work out there while you're at home. Once the mandates are enforced, even if it sounds like you have some flexibility, it's not really an option. And so that feeling of, the trust has been taken away has led a lot of people to this new term of quiet quitting, where people are waiting out the job market until it swings back up again, and then they'll make a change because they feel betrayed.
That's
So
interesting.
I'm not sure the 2-3 model is the best route. It's easy for executives because it sounds like flexibility. I can control it to some degree. As an executive, I feel more status and security knowing my team is in here, but it actually undermined the trust that was built before.
Rachel, you have
Yeah,
something
just to add to
add?
that, I think it is very important for the organization to articulate the why, as we were talking about, like Zach mentioned. And you can't just say, I want you in 2 or 3 days a week, and think people are going to understand that. And you have to help them see how, for an individual, it will help them do their job better, it'll help them grow as an individual and potential career opportunities within the organization. But the other layers are the team aspect. And Zach, I love your analogy on that, as well as the company aspect. And so often what we hear from individuals is why they don't like it is an individual feel. But when you start to see what it means for your team or cross-functional teams you work with that you haven't seen in person because you have different schedules, and what it means for your organization and how you can best support the direction of the organization, it helps to motivate you to feel connection to it. But there definitely is some challenges with that. There's definitely employees who feel less engaged when it comes to being forced to be back in. So you have to think through what you mean by when you're in, why you're in, and how you're best going to support them. So that holistic
Giving that
approach.
shared vision. Yeah.
Can I add a couple things to this too? So I think culture and trust are definitely the biggest part, but I think intentionality is what is often lacking, right? So people say, come back in. And if you don't have a leader that is, the leaders are not well trained to how to work with their teams, because our whole industry is built on relationships, all industries, right? They're built on relationships. So there's a Firehouse study, actually, very similar to what you're talking about, where they showed that, firemen who work together, fire people who work together, live together, eat together for days on end, are very effective. They have a really strong team building culture. So there is relationship spontaneity that occurs when you work with people, right? You come in, you get to know each other on a personal level as well, and not just on a quick Zoom call or a Teams call. It gives you a chance to build something stronger within the team. So there's some intentionality. I think that sometimes leaders forget that we have to do training of other leaders, because not all leaders know how to bring their teams together. So you can say, come back, but if you come back and your senior director is sitting in their office the whole time with the door shut, what kind of connection are you making with the team? So it has to be really intentional around the programs and how you work with the team. So I think that's something that's really important. It can't be just change the space, create new environments, but how are you actually really working together as a team, building relationships.
That's great. And I like Zach's term before. How do we pull them back, not push them back? So they feel not pushed, but wanting to come back into the office space. Zach and Allison, I'm going to target this next question towards you. What types of spaces, features, or products are people asking for now that were not top of mind before the pandemic?
Yeah, so people aren't really asking for products or spaces or features. They're asking what the heck they should be doing, right? They're like, what should we do? And it's a really personal question, right? It's a personal business question for every company. It's what, and we're going to say culture a lot up here because that's what it boils down to, right? It boils down to what type of culture you have and what kind of messaging you're putting out there to your team, right? So we're talking about the 3-2 models or 4-1, or are people coming in on days that they want to, or are there mandated days that people are supposed to come in? So the whole team's together. And so what you're finding is that nothing really lines up from business to business. Everybody's saying, well, are people hoteling? Are they doing, landing stations? Or should we just maintain the same layouts that we currently have in order to make sure people have their own space and they don't feel like they're giving something up? So it really is an individual thing. I think you have to take a hard look at your team. You have to talk to your team. You have to understand what their motivations are. You have to look at the culture of the organization that you're in and also understand, whether that's a culture of, a flat culture, or if you've got a hierarchical culture where, really it's a top down, we're telling people what to do, or people are actually able to participate in those decisions. Once you figure that out, you can start figuring out what kind of space you actually need. For the last 3 years, though, we've seen people unable to make any decisions, right? They've been sitting in leases that are too big or, misconfigured for them. Nobody's using them. Now, as we're starting to see these leases actually roll, the decision time is coming. And so people are starting to take a hard look at it. And it really is all over the board.
Is that same level of confusion true for what they are asking or not asking for in terms of real estate? Have you seen any kind of real estate trends being asked for?
Yeah, an interesting story. So a lot of people immediately, pandemic hits and people are like, we're never coming back to the office. We're subleasing everything. Nobody's ever coming in again. So I had a client who had their space on the market, 15,000 square feet for sublease. We got it out there. We had a tenant who was going to take it. That deal ultimately fell through about a week ago because the tenant who was going to take it isn't sure that they need it. My client, now that we've had it on the market for 6 months, is saying to me, well, maybe we want to take it off the market for sublease because I think we might be bringing our people back. So this is a company that's been in business for 50 years, 500 employees around the country, and they're still trying to kind of figure out what they're going to do. And it's a moving target. It's changing every 3 months, every 6 months. I think we're starting to see some stability. I think people are starting to feel like they can make decisions. But again, there's this weird dynamic between management and, the remaining part of the team where it's almost a parent-child relationship, okay? And the parent is ordering the child to do something is how a lot of employees feel. And the child, at least my 9-year-old, when I try and tell him to do something, it does not go over well. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And obviously, it also plays into the economy and the jobs market and all of these other things. So executives seem to be getting a little bit more aggressive in their approach to pulling people back. Employees maybe will acquiesce as the jobs market turns, but it's really still a book to be written. So.
Right. Allison, so same question for you. What are we seeing here?
So in terms of kind of product and applications, again, from a little bit of a different lens, but definitely feeling a lot of the same things you're saying as well, that it's not just a furniture solution, it's really uncovering what the client is looking for. So a lot of times we'll have a client walk in and tell us exactly what they want. And then once we kind of pull back the layers of what they're talking about, it's the complete opposite of what would support what they're even looking for. So a lot of what we're doing is also uncovering the why and what needs to be supported. And I think what we're seeing is just space needs to work so much harder than it did before. we thought we were going to see this trend of everybody going to really, really small spaces, really boutique layouts. And we're not really seeing that. We're seeing same amounts of space, but how are we using product and applications in ways that have multi points of different uses? And then also, I think something that's interesting is in a lot of these processes, we may have somebody from management or HR that's making these decisions, and kind of like what you're talking about with the parent child. I would encourage you to encourage your clients to have different levels of thought in these conversations. I'm not saying an HOA board where you have 20 people giving their opinion, but different levels, because something I even noticed when I came back in is the executive level is having a different experience coming back to the office than maybe the average production employee is. They've got a private office. They have space they can go in and have privacy, have sound control, have support. And then you're asking people coming from their homes where they had this heads down focused space that really supported what they were doing to come back into an open plan office. And I don't know about you, but my ADD is even worse now after 3 years of kind of being pulled back into a space where it was complete control for me. So there's a different level of experience. So I think it's hard, and you want your employees to feel like they've got a say in something and build that trust. So I think engaging different levels in the hierarchy in the office is very important. And then in terms of just finishing products for our spaces, it's not just a chair anymore. Clients are coming in and they're giving this idea of what they're looking for. And then we talk about fringe. We talk about how we're adding rugs and art and greenery and decor and things that make this space complete. When you look at some of our photography from Fringe, we've got before and afters, and just the difference between the two is stark. And it's emotional and it's subconscious, the things you feel when you see these different spaces, but it kind of hits that nerve of, this is what I was looking for, but I didn't know this is what I was looking for. So that's something we also try to do, is to help employees discover, or clients discover, things that will help make their space work harder, make it more attractive for people to come back in, and then just have a different look and feel than before the pandemic.
Yeah, just to add another layer to that, Allison, if you could share a little bit more about why the clients that we're servicing are asking for those fringe elements of the extra layers of details, because it is that pulling back into the office, right? And how that ask really goes back to what they want the space to do to enhance their culture. So if you want to add a little bit of color to that, and I think even layer in, and I think you guys can all add to it, but technology, right? The ask for what technology needs to do in a space is just endless now.
And not only is it something that's being asked for to pull employees back in, but to attract new employees and to attract that talent. There's a lot of options out there. And I think just the newer generations that are coming in, part of the consideration of a job isn't just salary, isn't just flexibility. It's the space I'm being put in. This is a large part of my life that I'm putting in every week. And I want to be proud of this space. I want to feel connected to this space. I want to feel like I walk through the doors and I understand the brand and the culture immediately. And it's not this wishy-washy sort of feeling. And so we're adding these layers and we're adding these art and different things. Some clients come in knowing exactly what they're looking for and ask for it. Other clients, like I said, are needing to kind of discover that's what's going to make the space feel unique. And a lot of times we'll have these corporate kind of brand stories and entities, but we're finding a lot of clients are wanting a really local flavor, even if they're a branch that's across the nation. They're wanting to feel very connected to San Diego. They're wanting to feel very connected to what that team's culture is in that space. And so for us to do this and add the layers and add the very curated pieces is a way to make these spaces extremely unique and on brand with what they're looking for.
That's great. We kind of touched on the gap between what employees want and executives are asking for in some of our previous comments here. But is there anything else you guys would want to add? Angela and Tiffany, from your perspective, maybe is there any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a big gap in it. I know Mary and Charlie are here, so they can cooperate this. But being at Qualcomm with 50,000 employees, it's really difficult when your CEO walks around the headquarters building and he doesn't see people there. So that's what he wants to see. He wants to see a bustling space. And so we've also, like everybody else, have tried lots of different approaches, right? We went all in on the mobile work environment, reserving space and kind of that employee experience. We got a lot of great feedback on it. The employees love it. But it just didn't create enough people in the space all at one time, right? You get certain days. We all know this. There's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Everybody shows up. Nobody's there on Friday. We're starting to see some people there on Monday too. But there's a huge gap with what he might see there and the days that people are all together and what the employees want, right? They want that flexibility, want that employee experience. They want to, they want to be trusted. And I think that's the hardest part because we do have a encouraged, not mandate. We're encouraging everybody to come back 4 days a week starting May 1st. So we are planning for that right now. We're really busy trying to get that done. But there is a big gap because we're not going to have people enforcing that. There's not going to be people walking around saying, Mary wasn't in her seat all day from 8 to 5. Nobody's going to do that. So there is this gap, but how do we still create this employee experience to bring them back, inspire them to come back without making them feel like they're not trusted, but then give, our leadership that purview to that the spaces are full and people are meeting and, collaborating. So I think there's just that gap has to change somehow. And I agree. I don't know who said it, but having the whole team get together with different representation of different groups within the company, right? From, the production staff all the way up to leadership and kind of doing that visioning session that is going to be a way for them to hear each other and for people to understand what it is that we need to do to try to bring everybody back together on the same plane.
That's a great point.
So one of the terms that I read that I like is magnetizing versus mandating. So that pullback is kind of subliminal through creating a great culture, right? Now, the cultural aspect of this, I feel like, is the messy side. I think a lot of leaders would love the expedient answer, which is apply aesthetics, a new space, new furniture versus the experience. It's a lot harder to put your arms around, and Tiffany mentioned not a lot of leaders are trained in this area to really get dirty with it and say, what do people really want? And honestly look at the data. So one of the reports that I looked at from Leesman looked at 22 different activities that people say is part of their job. And these are people who are reporting they do have flexibility to be in office or out of office. 16 out of those 22, they feel like they can do better at home. People are saying that they're experiencing more productivity, 5 to 29% at home. So if we're being honest about that, and we're saying, okay, what are the things that people do need to come into? Because they reported at least 3 things that people feel like are better done in the office. One of them, hosting visitors, clients, or customers, informal social interaction, and learning from other people. So if they're reporting that that's better done in the office, that's what our job is to provide the best scenario for them to do that there. One of the terms that I think you might like to steal, I don't know if I like it yet or not. It's kind of like the resumercial thing, but I heard this hotelification. Have you heard this one? Anyhow, it's not quite what you think, but hotelification is not just about aesthetics, but about behavior. That it's the thought of, if I'm going to stay in a hotel, I'm expecting the experience to be better than what I had at home. So the sleep should be better. The guests, the staff should greet me when I approach. The bathroom shouldn't be gross. There should be good food around. Now, if my experience when I come, say as a team member on my team, is poor, I'm going to choose whether I want to show up again. They're doing this reflection on a regular basis, so it's not something you can just put in place and leave it alone. We as leaders have to look on a regular basis as, are we meeting their needs? Am I touching base with them? Are there ways that we need to adapt?
That's great. I'll let you keep the mic. Can you share some of what you've seen that has worked and what has not worked as people have returned?
I don't know if this is quite answering the question, but since we get asked a lot of people going to the fully hybrid model, I just wanted to share, of all the times we've been asked to do that or look at it with different clients, we actually only have one example over the past 3 years of a client that went fully hybrid as far as their layout. And that was Kinnate Biopharma. Some of you might have seen it. It was in San Diego Business Journal and things like that. So they took 8,000 square feet and fully went to focus work being done at home And when people come in, it's collaboration, it's meeting spaces, it's touchdown spaces that are flexible. I say that because it was a great project and it turned out great. And I think it could be a model for a lot of clients, but I don't think that everyone has the confidence to quite get there yet. The clients that we're talking to, and like Zach said, I think a lot of people are kind of, paralysis and analysis, just like sitting there waffling on ideas. But I think if people are willing to engage in that approach, it can be successful. Not for everybody. I think that there's definitely clients who need private offices and dedicated workspaces, labs, things like that. So what was your original question?
I think you did answer it. Yeah. No, that definitely helps answer it. Yep. It was, can you share some of what you've seen that has worked and has not worked as people have returned to the office? Rachel, you can probably add some stuff there too.
Having worked with companies all over the country, it's interesting because like I live in Texas and people have been back for a while. So there's a lot of learnings from that. Or if you look at the middle part of the country, like they went home for a little while, but very different approach to what it meant to be returning to the office and when they started that journey. And so there's a lot of learnings around how space, how technology, even how protocols aren't supporting the way we get work done today from those organizations that have come back. And I love that you quoted some of the Leesman data. We talk often about that study, as well as when we're working with clients, really identifying for themselves from their employee perspective, what are the best enablers they have in their space today, what's better at home. And it's interesting to see how people want to solve for the collaboration piece, but work is very fluid. And so we do this work mode study where we can see patterns of when you're in focus work, when you're in collaboration, how big a group, is it virtual, combination, hybrid type setting, or is it all in person? What's your preference? And from that, we can see individuals do want to do some focused work in the office, or they have to, because it's not like your Tuesday could only be meetings. And so the intentionality is key, but having the right diverse settings of spaces, thinking about a focus area, thinking about permission to go move throughout the space and use those environments, thinking about the right types of collaborative environments that you might need when some people are remote and others are in room, or when you're one-on-one with somebody and they're virtual and you're in the office, what's that experience? So what we've learned from a lot of companies who are back and have been back is, one, they didn't lose the talent they thought they were going to lose. People started to get into their new norm of, okay, I'm in a couple days, and they put the different life things in place. Like I might need childcare again after school because I won't be home Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Things like that have all now started to become much more regular for them. But what has really changed is when they're in office, how do I use space better? And a lot of people have not invested into supporting that. So they're sitting at their workstation on a Teams call, and the person next to them's on a Teams call, and the person next to them's on a Teams call. And sometimes they're all on the same call. And so how do you solve for those types of things that happen now? And that is where we have a huge opportunity to solve that gap of the way we work today versus how space was designed pre-pandemic. And how we best enable people to come together for those different interactions, as well as have a place they can go seek privacy. Like I was working in here this morning, I could easily shut the door and seek privacy. How do I have that? How do I have access to that? And then it's a math problem, right? Like, how do I plan for how many people are on site and how many of those environments do I need? And how do I also demonstrate you have permission to work that way when you're in the office? We're so used to having one place we go, and we're there all day, and maybe we go into a meeting room. So lots of change that has to happen, both behavioral and with those enablers, space and tools. But people are back in a lot of places, and we're discovering through measurement those key gaps, those key needs that need to be solved for.
That's great.
So just chiming in, the question is, what have we seen work, right? And so when it's the subject of earning the commute, it's what have we seen work to have employees earn this commute and employers have them feel good about it, right? So you have to think about it from the context of the different stakeholders, right? So the employee's paradigm is different than the employer's paradigm. And so from an employee perspective, people are generally thinking about, especially since we've been at home for 3 years, am I doing my job? Am I delivering the product that's expected of me? from the employer's perspective, it's, is this employee not only being productive, but what is the contribution they are making to the enterprise as a whole, right? And so those two mindsets don't always align 100% because people feel like they're getting their work done, but all these intangibles that are around kind of really building out an enterprise that's going to be successful and evolve happen a lot in person. So what we've seen work and what I've seen work personally is direct leadership, honesty with employees, and saying, here's our mission. This is what we're trying to accomplish. You know, we all have different roles, but we all have the same job. We're all trying to build this amazing company, whatever it is that you do. So that's what I've seen work is direct leadership, helping people share a vision on how they're going to build whatever business they're in, and getting buy-in from the ground up.
Yeah, and I think that honest communication too go a long way.
Yeah, Zach, as you were describing that productivity and kind of different measures, there's a lot of trends from an HR perspective around how we measure productivity. And we didn't really measure productivity very well pre-pandemic for a lot of types of roles. It's hard to do. And so now it's how do you shift to outcome-based performance management? And how do you shift to thinking about, like you described, Zach, the contribution towards the organization's goals and ambitions? And with that, it comes with trust, but it comes with that transparency of what we're trying to achieve, not the hours you put in or the number of emails you send, or are you logged in for X number of meetings and your, analytics that show up every week from Microsoft, for example. It's really around what is my output? What am I contributing? And that's a hard thing for HR to shift to for a lot of organizations, but it's a very important shift when you think about helping individuals feel like they're contributing to something bigger than just their individual role or task. And so it's got to be holistically solved for with HR performance management as well.
That's great. Tiffany, next question I'd like to actually direct at you. Based on your experience, what are your clients, internal stakeholders, trying or requesting as it relates to creating an equitable and productive environment?
They all have different things that they want, but I think in reality, all the things that everybody's been talking about, we see that the hybrid environment definitely works, that one size doesn't fit all. We can't do all mobile work environment. We can't do all assigned. We need to find a balance with that. What they're requesting is people want that ability to have privacy when they need it, and they're okay with, they want different zones within the office space. And I think that's kind of always been around, but I think even more so now, they want that ability to go into a privacy room or a phone booth or be with their team. They want to move around the space. They want to be able to hide within the space and they don't want anyone to find them too. So I think there's a lot of different approaches to it, but a hybrid environment is definitely what they want. And they want the amenities, just like everyone was saying, you're working at home, you have so much access to controlling your space. They want more amenities within the space too. So if they're going to be at the office, I find people come in when they're going to go to the clinic for the day, or they're going to go, there's different things that they want from being at the office. So being able to provide those amenities in a way that they start seeing the work environment as their home base, where for the last 3 years, they've seen home as their home base. And it's really hard to go from having that home base and having a second home, which is the office, to just now flipping that over. So I think, finding a way to make it, I find that people don't want to come in unless they're going to get an assigned space. And our rule right now is if you're in the office 4 days a week or more, you can have an assigned space. So they have to show that, though. They have to use the reservation system. They have to come in 30 days in a row, 4 days a week. Then they get an assigned space. So because people don't want to keep stuff in two different places, I think, then they like to fill their workstations up with junk. But, that's a whole nother story. So, but I think that in reality, that's people want that flexibility. But if you're going to ask them to come back, you have to provide them the space they need if that's going to be their home base.
So 20 years down the road, we're future thinking here. What are we seeing that has stayed, that has come out of this whole experience? What does that office look like to you guys?
Well, I have a few things that I think on this. So one, I think we're moving towards a 4-day work week. So I'm sure many of you have seen the studies. I think that's coming. So mark my words, just like it used to be 6 days, we went to 5 and everyone thought, oh, we're never going to go to a 5-day work week. We did. Now we're going towards a 4-day work week. How many people come in on Fridays? Very few. And because of technology and productivity, I think that you can get what you can get done in 32 hours, maybe a little bit more. But you don't need to be in the office to do it. So I think we're going to a 4-day work week. So I think that's coming.
Right.
I also think that the Gen Z generation, which are my kids who are now in college, they actually romanticize the office space. So I don't know. There's an article in the New York Times, for those of you who read it, which I actually think they love to do TikTok videos of them going into the office, getting ready for the office.
I love it.
But it's an experience. It's an experience for them that they haven't actually experienced. So for them, it's an experience.
It's a novelty. I love that.
They love experience, right? So going into the office. So if you create an environment that is TikTok ready, but I think if you have an environment that they find as a new experience, you're going to see a lot of this generation. I think it's flipping again, right? Those of us who've been in the office for a long time are like, I can do my work anywhere. For those who haven't experienced the office, it's something they want to experience. So I think it's something to keep an eye on for the future. I do think that the younger generation is going to want to come into the office. So 4 days a week. So just
That's great. You want to add to that, Angela? Do you want a 4-day work week?
I do, yes. But I think that in terms of the future, I can't imagine, Zach, close your ears, that we're going to be using quite the same square footage in the same way 20 years from now. I'm not saying it won't all be occupied, but I think it will be different. And I think that because people are looking for that purposeful presence when they are together, that we're just going to have to let go of some things. I think that a lot of the leadership in a lot of the organizations will eventually turn over, because I'm already seeing with the leadership that I'm talking to, there's a struggle right now with the leadership that's kind of headed out the door and who's coming in of trying to hang on to how things used to be and moving forward. I do think that we can support workplaces in a way that does lead to more creative solutions, better connection and learning from people without wasted space and materials.
That's great. Anyone else want to add to this?
I'll jump in. I think it's so fluid. It's impossible to predict, right?
Yeah.
I don't disagree with either of you, by the way. I think, 4-day work week is possible. I think a lot of that ties into personal ambitions and what people are trying to accomplish with their careers as well. There's always going to be people who are working, 80 hours a week instead of 40, and there's always going to be people working 20 hours a week. When you look at kind of the history of how people have worked in office buildings in particular, right? Everybody 20 years ago thought open space was this novel idea, and that existed in the early 1900s in New York City, so it was nothing new. And then, in the kind of early 2010s, I guess, in that range, everybody's like, oh, we're going to give everybody on the window line cubes so they have natural light, and we'll put the offices on the interior, right? And so that all happened. And then everybody's going to be in a workstation, and we're going to go that style. Everybody seems to think that these things are permanent, but it really is a shifting target, right? That's why we have tenant improvements in office buildings. And that's why they get gutted every 10 years and these buildings get rebuilt. So, I think what we will see in the short term, in the next probably 5 years, is an adjustment to be more flexible to employees' personal needs, giving them opportunities to have more flexible time at the office, not necessarily 100% scheduled, not necessarily dialed in on it's going to be, XYZ team here this day and this day and this day. But I think in organizations where there's a high level of trust from the executives and the production team, you're going to see more freedom. And I think as long as the businesses continue to grow and continue to innovate, and not being together in the office all the time doesn't impact that, everybody's going to march in the same direction. They'll cooperate. What you're not going to see is companies perform poorly, miss targets, and everybody have that same freedom. So it's really up to the employees proving to the employers that they can help the company grow and still have that flexibility. And it's up to the employers to prove to the employees that they trust them to do that. So it's a really complex dynamic, but that's what I think will happen.
That's great. So we have about 4 minutes left. I want to do a lightning round question. So if you ladies want to offer your crystal ball quickly. Yeah, crystal ball.
The thing I think about a lot is that technology will never go away.
Mhm.
And I see a toddler with an iPad now, and they know how to use it better than I do. So just that rapid sort of increase in technology in 20 years, I think is just going to blow our minds. And how these younger generations are utilizing those tools in the workplace. And if they don't have those tools, they most likely won't be in that workplace. So that's just my opinion, is I think tech is going to be something that's just going to continue exploding,
Yeah.
and making this hybrid integration easier and easier for everyone.
Yeah, I'll add on top of technology, just the way we work with technology, but also as teams or as organizations is very fluid. And so I think we're going to need to really think differently around multimodal spaces, environments that can flex, because there's continued change that we're always going to face. And organizations and leaders always want to have the answer. And that's why they're delayed to make decisions right now, is they want it to be very clear. They want to be confident that it's the right direction. They want to mitigate risks. But the reality is you need it to be something that evolves with you. And so I think over the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's going to be something that you need foundationally set with a lot of room for iteration, a lot of room for learning, and have employees involved in that process to help discover the best way to go forward.
That's great. All right. So lightning round, because we're still looking for the magic bullet. In a sentence, or just sum it up in a word, because we've heard a lot of themes. How do you create a workspace that earns people's commute? I'm going to start down there. Yeah, go for it.
Well, hopefully I cover a lot really quick here. I think it starts with understanding why you exist as an organization and what you're trying to achieve, clear communication around that, and then set up your space and your enablers, your work experience, in order to best support that. And so at that leader level, you have to have a really good picture and that visioning and that alignment piece around what we want and why we want this for our organization. And then you start to put the wheels in motion to best help your employees feel connected to that. And that space is actually where you go. The office is where you want to go in order to feel that. So it's a very personal journey, as we started with, but it's very critical you have that vision for the future at the top.
Allison?
Oh, I need a notebook. I need to write this out, this mission statement. I would say just the trigger words: listening, trust, uniqueness, communication, and vision.
That's great.
No, that listening, I think, is key, right? So listening to what it is that people want, and then not just listening, but proving that you're actually going to act on what you're hearing. And then I think iteration is the last one, because you're not going to get it right on the first try. Tiffany, you've seen that, right? So you're not going to get it right on the first try, and you have to be flexible. You know, a lot of people have the tendency that it's like, oh, I have to get it perfect. It's just not going to be perfect. It's going to be a little messy. And so keep trying. That's what I would say.
I definitely think that we have to be intentional with our approach in ensuring that we have that alignment with the why, not only the why of the employees, but the why of the leadership and the why of the company. They all have to blend together. And I think through that, I agree, you have to be ready to pivot and evolve on a continual basis. And, you know, every generation is going to change, and every aspect of how we work is going to change. And, you know, the pandemic we'd never experienced doesn't mean that there isn't going to be some other disruption. So we have to be ready for disruption at any time, and we have to be able to, you know, respond to that. And I'm not saying another pandemic, but I'm just saying any disruption that can occur. I mean, we're dealing with it now with the macroeconomic climate. So I think just always being able to do that, but always understanding the why, I do think is like one of the key aspects of ensuring that as we move in the future that we're evolving correctly. So
Great.
It's not my phrase, but I really like it a lot. That purposeful presence, I think, represents on both sides what spaces will become, since the commute back to the original topic of this discussion, is now being shifted from a cost of living expense to being seen as a cost of working, according to employees, then we need to earn that from them by creating purposeful presence, not only in the space that we create, that it supports what they need to do best together, but also as leaders, that our presence is purposeful when we're there, that we're not just hiding in an office, but we're there to lead them and guide them and mentor them.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This was great. A lot of good information and good insight here. Thank you, everyone, for coming.